Good morning and welcome everyone. And thank you for joining us on International Anti-Corruption Day 2025 for today's webinar. I'm Linda Timothy, IBAC's Executive Director of Prevention and Communication, and I'll be hosting today's event. I'd like to open this morning by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we're broadcasting from, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and to any Aboriginal people joining us today. I also respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways across Victoria and pay respect to elders past and present. So today we're here to talk about artificial intelligence or AI. It's a really broad topic that we hear about almost every day at the moment. But our focus for this event will be on how to use AI with integrity in the Victorian public sector. While much of our conversation will be around the Victorian public sector, I'm sure those of you joining us from interstate will also find the conversation insightful. But just before we get into it, I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. We've had a lot of interest in this event from across the public sector, from the VPS departments to local government, police and emergency services, the water sector, transport and our partner integrity agencies. So a very warm welcome to all of you. So I'll you'll soon hear some short presentations from our panel and have an opportunity to ask questions of IBAC, the Victorian Auditor General's Office and the Victorian Department of Government Services. As each presenter is speaking, if you have any specific questions you'd like to ask them, please add those to the Q&A box on your screen. And if you'd like subtitles, you can turn on closed captions in your meeting controls. You can also click Interpretation in the meeting controls to see Auslan interpreters. This event's being recorded and we'll email your link to the recording and to the slides as soon as they're available. So our aim for today's webinar is to provide you with some specialist insights into how VPS staff can ensure artificial intelligence is used with integrity in mind. And as many of you will know, AI is a fast emerging technology that enables computer systems to perform tasks that ordinarily require human input. And that includes things like information generation, visual perception, speech recognition, decision making and language translation, and a host of other things. Use of AI across government is increasing, and there are certainly advantages in using AI to enhance many aspects of public administration. We can all see the advantages of doing more with less, improving efficiency and service delivery, faster analysis of data, and reducing workload, just to name a few. However, we can also see how AI has the potential to threaten integrity in the public service by undermining transparency, accountability and fairness, or creating new opportunities for fraud and cybercrime. And AI can create risks for information management too, particularly in relation to disclosure of sensitive information to third parties and misinformation generated by AI. On the upside, AI systems can also prevent, detect, and expose corruption. But if misused, these systems can prevent integrity risks in their design and use within the public service. And that's both by public servants themselves and individuals or organisations outside the public service using AI to mislead or defraud. So at IBAC, we've recently done some work to explore the key integrity risks associated with AI, and I'll briefly run through those now. And we'll also link some of our public resources in the chat for your reference. So firstly, AI systems can be intentionally designed for corrupt purposes. These systems can be designed to deliberately mislead, misrepresent, or manipulate information. One example of this is identity fraud, such as using video or audio manipulation to pretend to be, for example, a senior public servant or a politician to access information. And this can result in the risk of sensitive information being leaked. Another example is in the automation of administrative tasks to increase productivity. But these systems can also be used or actually designed to fraudulently generate false documents, things like invoices and timesheets. And secondly, AI systems can be manipulated with false data input. These systems are designed for specific tasks. And often we can't access or we can't understand the processes by which they generate results. And this lack of transparency can lead to significant risks, especially if the data fed into the system is false or open to manipulation. And when this happens, outputs may be biased at best or completely unreliable. So depending on the tasks for which AI systems have been designed, the output could affect government decision making. And result in things like misallocation of resources, biased hiring practices, unfair tender outcomes, poor or inaccurate policy analysis, and a range of other consequences. One good example of this is the use of AI to generate falsified grant applications, enabling fraudulent access to government funding. And finally, AI systems can be applied or misused in a way that creates integrity risks. For example, input of sensitive personal information into an open AI system is not only a breach of privacy, but can damage public trust in the ability of government organisations to store and handle sensitive information. The same is true of inputting commercially sensitive or cabinet in confidence information into open systems, which could in turn damage the integrity of government decision making. And we've all heard examples of generative AI being used to reduce workload and produce reports that contain hallucinatory references. Again, eroding trust in the advice being provided and ultimately in the public sector. So what can public sector organisations do? Well, of course, I'd encourage you to take a look at the guidelines linked in the chat for a list of things you can do when working with or designing AI systems. Importantly, public sector organisations should provide clear guidelines for staff to ensure AI is used with integrity in mind. AI systems that aren't appropriate for use can be blocked, and of course, protecting sensitive information is crucial. As always, training for staff is critical, and that's training on the ethical use of AI, on the risks of misusing AI, and on relevant guidelines, such as those produced by the Office of the Victorian Information Commissioner on the expectations for VPS organisations using generative AI tools, and we'll include a link to those in the chat as well. So like everything, good governance, clear policies and guidelines, training and oversight are as important for AI-powered systems as they are for any new technology or system an organisation might introduce. And that's it from me. So I am now delighted to introduce our first panel member, and I'd like to introduce Bethany Fennick. Bethany is currently Director, Strategy, Policy and AI in the Department of Government Services, responsible for data sharing, cyber and AI policy. In relation to AI, Bethany's team focuses on safe and responsible AI use in the VPS. Bethany has worked in the public service for over 10 years across several departments, focused on improved data outcomes. Prior to this, Bethany spent over a decade in the Australian Public Service, working across economic and social statistics areas at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I wanted to say ABS there. So please join me in welcoming Bethany. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Linda, for your introduction. As mentioned, my remit in Department of Government Services, or DGS, covers data sharing, cybersecurity and AI policy. And the focus of the work that my team does in the AI policy is really on supporting safe and responsible use across the VPS. I'm really pleased to be here today to provide you all with an overview of the work that we've done and have underway. Just move to the first slide. Before I jump into talking about our work, I'll take a few moments to set the scene, and to be honest, this probably covers some of the content that Linda's already covered off on in relation to opportunities and risks. But AI technology is evolving quickly. It's becoming more accessible through everyday digital platforms and apps, and through that it's offering some really great opportunities to deliver better services to the community and to drive public sector productivity. For example, the Productivity Commission's August report on harnessing data and digital technology states that productivity improvements from AI could add about $116 billion to GDP over the next decade. It also talks about AI having the potential to augment rather than replace roles in the workforce. Some examples of opportunities that AI, and in particular generative AI, present include generating content and creating first drafts of content, supporting creative thinking, improving accessibility to information, as well as improving personalised and accessible services. As Linda did flag, though, there's a number of risks and challenges that come with this. These aren't new, but they tend to be exacerbated by generative AI technology. They touch on legal, ethical, privacy challenges, accuracy and bias issues, as well as security and bad faith actors as well. On to the next slide, thank you. So with that context, the work that we're doing within DGS is really looking to provide guidance and guardrails within which public servants can safely and responsibly innovate with AI. And we have set up some foundational practices to support this. This includes 2 policies related to generative AI. The first one is on the safe and responsible use of generative AI in the Victorian Public Service. This was issued in November 2024 and sets out that VPS personnel can use generative AI tools and technologies for official work purposes, provided that publicly available information is used in public tools, there's education and monitoring of generative AI tools use, and use complies with existing obligations such as privacy, data and cybersecurity, legal and human rights obligations. That policy sets a minimum position across the VPS, and departments and agencies can choose to set their own policies on top of what is set out in the generative AI policy. We have also provided practical guidance to support the policy, which includes some example scenarios of what use looks like, as well as training modules to help in its application as well. The second policy that has been released is quite specific, banning the use of DeepSeek products on Victorian government systems and services, and this follows an Australian government direction that noted DeepSeek posed an unacceptable level of risk to the Australian government. So the Victorian government followed suit. We have also partnered with Australian and state and territory governments to develop the National Framework for Assurance of AI in Government. This was designed to establish a nationally consistent approach across states and territories and the Commonwealth to safe and ethical AI use. This framework is underpinned by Australia's AI ethics principles, which is a suite of 8 principles designed to ensure AI use is safe, secure and reliable. A few of the principles I'd particularly like to highlight, given the topic today, human-centred values. So this is about putting the rights, well-being, autonomy and interests of people first. Transparency and explainability, so that people can understand where they're being impacted or interacting with AI. Contestability, that there's a timely process that allows people to challenge the use or outcomes of an AI system. And accountability, that there continues to be human oversight and people responsible for the outcomes of AI systems, and that human oversight is enabled. The national framework and Australia's AI ethics principles set the foundation for our pilot VPS AI assurance framework, which I'll touch on in more detail. And if we can just move to the next slide, please. Excellent. The pilot AI assurance framework is essentially a self-assessment tool that we've developed. It comes with supporting guidance that's to be used to identify and assess the ethics and risks associated with AI use cases. It's intended to support safe and responsible AI delivery in the VPS by promoting transparency and accountability, and a common approach to identifying, evaluating and communicating the ethics and risks associated with AI use cases. A couple of things just to highlight about the framework. Firstly, it isn't intended to replace existing policies, frameworks or practices for technology projects. It really aims to complement and support their delivery. Secondly, it's not intended to capture an individual's use of AI tools, but it's really intended to cover when a team is seeking to introduce an AI tool to support their team or organisation's work. And lastly, and really importantly, it's not intended as something that's only ever completed once. It's really intended to be reviewed across the project lifecycle, and that includes regular monitoring after a tool has been introduced and is in production. There's 4 sections to our pilot AI assurance framework, and completion of all of the elements depends on the level of risk that gets identified. So having said that, the first 3 sections are to be completed for every AI use case, and those sections really get you to articulate what your use case is, the benefits that you see that it will deliver, and also to do an initial risk assessment that really centres around looking at a potential to do harm, influence on decision making or triggering actions that may affect individuals, and any interaction with the public. The last section, which we call the full assessment, is only completed for AI use cases which have a residual risk of medium or high following the completion of that risk statement questionnaire at section 3. The full assessment really then asks you to consider and document whether your AI use case complies with the 8 Australia's AI ethics principles, and to then reconsider what your risk assessment is. One of the things I'll also just mention quite specific about the framework is that it also requires that any AI use case that proposes any kind of automated decision making is immediately considered high risk and needs to go through the full assessment process. I'll just get you to flip to the next slide. Thanks. So as well as setting the frameworks and guidelines within which the VPS can operate to support innovation, we're also conducting some pilots to support safe and responsible AI use as well. A couple of these are up on screen. We have piloted VicGov Chat, which is a closed loop, secure generative AI chat assistant for the VPS. Essentially like a safe and secure ChatGPT. This pilot engaged approximately 1,000 users across multiple departments. Feedback was really positive. and work's underway to make that available as a tool to the Victorian Government and departments at the moment. We've also run an agentic AI proof of concept. When I say agentic AI, I'm referring to AI tools or systems that can operate independently or with minimal supervision to achieve a predefined goal by planning or executing a series of actions. This proof of concept was designed to test the feasibility of deploying specialist AI agents in a way that streamlined output generation, but also in a way that the actions that were taken by the AI tool were recorded so they could be reviewed and validated by a person. The prototype that was built was developed around generating position descriptions, which is a process that takes a surprising amount of time. Results from the proof of concept were promising. The position descriptions were generated more quickly. The transparency and explainability behind the actions that were taken were also documented and then able to be reviewed by a person to see what had happened. So that really helped support and demonstrate human oversight is possible at critical junctures in a process to deliver that transparency and accountability without sacrificing efficiency. Lastly, we also support a VPS AI community of practice. We have over 1,700 members across the VPS, across all levels, across all VPS levels. They all share a common interest in AI. It's a very active community. We hold monthly lunch and learn sessions that are incredibly well attended. We have over 200 people attend each lunch and learn with a really strong focus on collaboration, shared learning, upskilling and enablement. That is my very brief overview of what we do and what some things are underway. So I'll hand back to Linda and we're very happy to talk in more detail if anyone wants to reach out. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Some really important context, particularly and foundational tools around the foundational tools to ensure safe and responsible use of AI in the public sector. And I particularly noted your focus on human oversight at critical points. So now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our next panellist, Dave Barry, Deputy Victorian Auditor General. Dave joined Fargo in 2017 after serving as CEO of the Alpine Shire Council, where he led reforms focused on efficiency, innovation and practical execution. Dave's work is centred on the idea that most public sector transformation is adoptive rather than novel, and that real progress comes from simplification. In the AI era, Dave is especially interested in how organisations build the capabilities that AI amplifies the need for, including orchestration, strong system design, judgment, and ethics. At Fargo, he focuses on building the system-level capability required to turn AI tools into real, measurable public value. Please welcome Dave.
Good morning, everyone. Always difficult to talk to a screen, but thanks for joining us around this virtual table. So I guess today I was going to talk a little bit around how we practically use AI at Fargo, some of the emergent risks that we see, and finally, what it looks like through an integrity lens. But before I start into my presentation, I thought it's worth sharing this slide because everything I'm about to say, in common with all industrial revolutions, on the slide in front of you, you'll see things that we predicted will happen, and inevitably a whole range of things happen as a result of industrial revolutions that we never fathomed. So we like to say at Fargo that we're 10 steps into multiple races around the world. So I think we're certainly very early on the journey here. Now my clicker I don't think is working, so someone could advance to the next slide. In terms of our journey and our roadmap, we've gone through 4 different phases: generative AI, intelligent productivity, autonomous agents, and custom agents. And I thought I might just briefly talk you through some of them. If you could advance to the next slide, please. So in terms of generative AI assistants, be it ChatGPT, which we use at an enterprise level, Copilot, Gemini, Perplexity, I'm sure everyone around the table at some point in time is reasonably heavy users of these tools. I know internally we have some people that spend upwards of 25 or 40% of their day engaged with these tools. For anyone that isn't familiar, most of these tools have agents on the top left and a generative AI assistant to engage with. And one of the key things that we do in our environment is wherever we surface AI, we always talk about the data protection posture associated with that and signal it to our users. But moving on, next one. Yep. If you have deployed Copilot, something that we find incredibly beneficial internally is the development of a prompt library. So if you're not using that feature, I'd highly commend it to you. On the screen, you'll see the verbs that we use to anchor our workforce on, as in how you tend to use generative AI, and we develop custom prompts and push them out across the organization. But some of these features you may not be using. We sort of started our journey on the expansion by using things like intelligent recap for Teams. We use it across all our meetings. We record almost every meeting, and we certainly transcribe, I would say, upwards of 95% of meetings. And what that enables us to do is, if you don't attend the meeting or if you do attend, you're able to jump back in, see intelligent meeting recap, see where you're mentioned in the meeting, see who the speakers were, all time-stamped. And we'll jump on to the next one. I'm sure that, again, is a feature that most people are using. Perhaps now going into territory that's a little bit more novel, something we find, again, incredibly beneficial is the meeting facilitator agent. The facilitator really acts like a human in the meeting, so you can ask it questions, but it also takes notes for the meeting, assigns actions, follows up on those actions, and actually monitors your progress against the agenda. And we develop agendas in Microsoft Loop. We think it's the best tool. And it monitors your progress against that agenda and coaches you in the meeting chat as you go along. And finally, I might just talk about these as sort of our foundational elements. Channel agent, similar idea to facilitator in Teams. You deploy the channel agent in a channel. You'll see one of my colleagues here was getting the channel agent to arrange a meeting. And you'll be able to see that in front of you. Again, behaves like a, next one, then behaves like a user in the meeting, sends weekly summaries. You can ask it questions and answers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the core of our AI suite that we develop. But what you'll now see is really these specialized agents, and hopefully you'll be able to play that video. You'll see a video playing in front of you, and what's really going on here is this is the specialized suite of tools that we've developed for our financial auditors. And what this particular agent is doing is it's taking what we call a 3402 report, which is an externally prepared report that comes in a lot of different formats. It's saying assess that report against a series of controls that are defined. And you'll see on the screen here where the report is being uploaded, the controls have been selected, and finally spit out a report that we then provide from our systems assurance auditors to our financial auditors. And typically this process would have taken at least a day to get to the review phase. And what you now see happening is a day's work in front of you in approximately, a minute or two. We're really proud of these custom agents that we've developed. We'll just wait for this one to load, and this is sort of the real-time amount of time it takes for it to happen. It'll be there in a second because it is a video. And it spits out a perfectly formatted report. So really that's a core business process, and we've done that across a number of processes where what we do is we take something that would traditionally have taken someone upwards of a day, delivered a more efficient solution, but also a more effective solution, because the feedback from our financial auditors was that our systems assurance team would deliver our report analysis in a range of different formats, and that they had to then reformat before they put it on the file. So that's one of the things we do. If you jump to the next slide. We're doing likewise in our performance audit system. We've built a performance audit system inside of Microsoft SharePoint, because when we think strategically, we're really focused on vendor consolidation, and we've certainly consolidated on the Microsoft suite. So for us, in selecting any software product for the future, any application, the question we ask ourselves is, strategically, is this vendor likely to deliver the best AI results in the long term, knowing that ultimately most of our interface with products will happen through AI. And again, you'll see an example there of a custom agent that we've built. So turning to risk, we've always been heavily focused on cybersecurity at Vago because of the data that we hold. But the real shift that I've seen over the last 12 to 24 months is we've really focused on an uplift in our data governance, our data security, our data risk and compliance. Next slide. And we use a tool called Purview to do this, and you'll see some of its features on the screen in front of you. But really, in this modern world, there's no data that's hidden in a lazy fashion. So when I talk about insider risk, I'm talking about subconscious or unconscious extrication of data outside your environment, but also cross-sharing of data unknowingly within your environment. And Purview introduces to us a series of rules. If you jump onto the next slide, every single interaction with our AI products online is scanned. So if you paste into anything from Gemini to Perplexity to Grok, no matter where you paste data in our environment, it is scanned, and it's scanned based on Microsoft like to say 78 trillion signals per day to assess your user risk. But we also have AI-driven data loss prevention rules and data security posture management rules in place. And of course, when you introduce a tool like this in the first instance, you really start to see where your data is being lost and very quickly remedy that. And we find the Purview product and many competitors out there a really incredible tool in responding to that risk. And then finally, of course, we like to talk about how you lead with integrity in the age of AI. And I guess the way I look at this, if we jump to the next slide, is here's an internal piece of coaching material that we use with our staff. But the key message that we always have is, in terms of understanding the decisions remain human, in terms of understanding your role of accountability, responsibility, and authority, nothing has really changed in that regard. And we're quite fortunate in that we are able to anchor our workforce back on the standards. But you'll see in front of the screen there the sorts of things that we do to help anchor our workforce back on those standards. Finally, and last but by no means least, and excuse me, we've had a little bit of technical problem this morning, so I'm struggling to read the prezzo a little bit at times. We always ask people, can they explain the purpose that they should be able to explain the purpose for which they used AI, they should be able to validate the results of AI, and they should be able to attribute their decisions, judgment, and content back to a source. So really, in terms of the integrity lens, probably my key message would be that the AI world amplifies a whole range of things. It amplifies the risk in terms of insider threat. It also amplifies all of the risks that existed previously. And I think the question that faces us all is, how can we translate traditional concepts into the new AI context? So hopefully some things of use and interest there for you this morning in terms of sharing how we're practically applying AI use at Vago, our primary risk focus being information governance, and how we are always reconnecting our workforce with the fundamentals of their responsibilities and accountabilities in this new world. I think that's everything from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you so much for sharing a heap of information about your use of AI tools at Vago to improve efficiency and output, and particularly your really quite sophisticated mechanisms for controlling the risks that emerge. And so now I would like to introduce our final presenter this morning, Sean Tiller. Excuse me. Sean is currently IBAC's Director of Digital Forensics and Electronic Collections, where he manages two of IBAC's operational support team, the high-tech crime team, which conducts digital forensics, and the electronic collection unit, which collects and monitors lawfully intercepted information. Prior to joining IBAC, Sean led the digital forensics service at BHP, was the country head of financial crime compliance at Standard Chartered Bank in Vietnam, and was a member of Victoria Police and the Australian Federal Police. So please join me in welcoming Sean.
Thank you very much, Linda. So what I thought I'd talk about for the last part of this presentation is how at IBAC we're cautiously exploring the use of AI. We're very early in our journey. We are certainly nowhere near as advanced as Dave was suggesting Vargo is at the moment. But we are seeing some potential for some significant benefits, certainly in my space, which is in the digital forensics and electronic collections space. So where does it all start? The next slide, please. It starts with our policy. There's no real surprises in our policy. It would follow the fundamentals that were previously mentioned by both the previous speakers. It starts with consultation, mainly with the SMEs, or the subject matter experts within IBAC in the IT and cybersecurity areas, but more broadly also within compliance and legal, just to ensure what we intend to do is within the risk appetite of the organisation. We then walk it through several levels of approvals, and again for AI and IT it would be various IT forums and governance boards such as the Enterprise Architecture Board and the Information Governance Security Committee. Once we've got the approvals in place, probably where our policy may differ from others is around data sensitivity. So the data we hold here at IBAC can be incredibly sensitive and needs to be kept within our environment. So in our policy, it states that any interaction with online tools such as ChatGPT and Copilot is considered a public disclosure. So what that means in real terms is that if an IBAC person is interacting with these tools, anything that they upload, any query that they type in to those tools, IBAC needs to be satisfied that if that was in the public domain, it's at a classification and sensitivity level that it can be in the public domain. So as a result, I would suggest at this stage we're not actively using some of these tools, such as Vago is, but this is something we're definitely looking at. However, there is AI functionality being incorporated into a lot of the tools that we do here to support investigations into allegations of corruption and misconduct. So next slide. So I'll talk a bit about a couple of these. So these are sort of AI functions as opposed to AI tools in their entirety that we're starting to see and starting to use here. The first is vision analytics. So things like optical character recognition is something that's been around for many years, but now the tools that my teams use have the ability to not only look for text in an image, but also to look at the entirety of that image and all the objects that appear within that. And as you can see from the screenshot there, you can identify images and classify them appropriately. So in an example from CCTV footage, in the past, if we had, say, for example, 10 hours of CCTV footage, we would have to have someone physically go through that footage almost frame by frame to look for things of relevance. With these new tools, we can actually process them and then search across them with very broad search terms, such as show me any time a person walks past the camera who's wearing a red shirt and a pair of sunglasses, or show me any time that a car with a trailer drives past. And it will take us straight to that footage. So we're definitely getting some time efficiencies out of these tools immediately. Another thing is talk to text, and again, talk to text is nothing new. This particular presentation is probably having live captions as I speak. But what we're looking at is a particular large language model called Whisper. Whisper is an open source language model which you can download and install on suitably strong infrastructure in your own environment. And what we're looking to use it for is foreign language translation and transcription. So within IBAC, we have certain powers under federal legislation to monitor telephone conversations, and in some cases those telephone conversations are in a foreign language. At the moment, the process is we get an accredited translator and interpreter in to listen to those conversations and then translate them into English. And that can take time. It can take several days just to identify a relevant translator, depending on the dialect. and that slows things down. And of course, there's an expense associated with that. Also, as you can imagine, when we're monitoring telephone conversations, a majority of them may not be relevant to our investigations. So we're actually paying someone to listen to conversations and translate them, when in fact we're not going to need those for future investigative purposes. So what we're looking at to use Whisper for is to feed Whisper. We're going to set it up in a segregated part of our environment that has no access to the internet, so we can actually push more sensitive data sets to it. Send the audio content to Whisper, have that translated into English and then summarised so that an investigator can quickly read the summary and make a determination as to whether or not that is relevant to the investigation. And if it is, it will then get pushed to the human translator interpreter for them to go through and go through in more detail. So again, this triage process using Whisper, we're hoping that will save considerable time and expense when it comes to foreign language content. And the next slide. The other thing we're looking at our tools are starting to incorporate is natural language processing. So at the moment, in addition to the multimedia items such as images and videos, we get a lot of user-generated content, such as emails, Word documents, PDFs, spreadsheets, etc. And at the process at the moment is our digital forensic specialists will grab that data, ingest it into our tools, and then run a query across that tool to try and reduce that large data set into something more manageable. And those queries can be complex, but generally they're find in the emails keyword 1 and keyword 2 between person A and person B between these dates. And then that would return a list of responsive items that then someone would go through and individually and assess their relevance for the investigation. With natural language processing, we're seeing that the investigators can do this in a much more natural and intuitive way. And as you can see from the screenshots there, the questions they can ask are just like a question they would ask a human being, such as anyone talking about travel. And not only is the question easy to ask, the responses you're getting back are also equally valuable. So instead of just getting a list of saying, here's 100 emails that have people talking about travel, it actually summarises saying, this person's talking about travelling going here, or this person's talking about renting a vehicle. And again, that will allow the investigators to quickly identify those real gold nuggets that we're looking for in large data sets relevant to our investigation. So finally, the next slide, whilst AI can be used for good, it can also be used obviously for evil. And whilst we haven't at this stage seen AI in our investigations, a lot of our digital forensic tools have the ability to detect what they believe to be AI-generated content. And I'm confident when they do start to arise, because it will only be a matter of time, we'll be able to quickly identify that. But these are just some open source examples of what has been seen in the environment. The first is a bit of an older example where a CEO must have had content online, such as video of them presenting or radio interviews, etc., that they were able to ingest into an AI tool to the extent that they were able to get the AI to mimic the CEO's voice. They then engaged with someone from procurement in that particular organisation and purporting to be the CEO, were able to get that person to transfer a large amount of money to a bank account, which was subsequently stolen. The other one is an example that's quite common that's getting around at the moment, which is around travel expenses and not so much AI generated, but certainly taking an original image, which is the image on the right, which has the lower value, and running that through an AI tool to make it have a larger value so you can obviously claim more money. And as you can see in the image, the one on the left, which is AI generated, has some additional features added to it, such as the crinkling of the paper to give it more of an authentic look. To the human eye, it's impossible to tell that that's AI generated, but the digital forensic tools, and I believe there's some of this being incorporated into various financial systems, AI is actually very good at identifying AI. So these sort of things are going to become more common. In the past, if someone wanted to generate an image like this, they would have to have a bit of technical skill, they'd have to have access to tool sets such as Photoshop. Now it's as simple as uploading an image into something like ChatGPT and putting in a natural language prompt. So that's where we are at the moment. That's all I've got to talk about. Sorry, I've gone through that bit quick, conscious of time, but I'm looking forward to any questions that the audience might have. Thank you.
Thanks, John, for that really insightful run through of how IBAC is starting to use AI. So we've now come to the Q&A part of this webinar. So thank you to all those who have submitted a question with their registration or during the presentations today. So we'll try to answer as many as possible, and we'll try and keep our responses short. First question I have is for Bethany. What strategies should agencies implement to address the misuse or unauthorised disclosure of information resulting from AI use?
Okay, thanks, Linda. Quick reflection is that it's important we remember our existing obligations, especially as VPS members. We know not to put work data or personal information into Google searches. We know we need to check and validate our work. That doesn't change with AI. But having said that, I really think it's a combination of strategies that's really important for supporting appropriate AI use. So that's policy and guidance, which includes examples and case studies of what appropriate use looks like. Also training, and other controls can include reporting and assurance for visibility on how AI tools are being used, and also potentially technical controls that manage employee access to AI tools. I'll keep it short. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Bethany. We've got a question for Dave now. What are methods to deter the use of AI for criminal gain while continuing to encourage its use for productivity gains?
Yeah, I mean, I assume the question here is through perhaps that external lens of deep fakes and the likes. And I mean, I guess the way I look at this is who achieves the greater benefit in this AI world. We live in a world where perhaps there are lots of things that we would like to do to be able to if we had unlimited resources, respond to the prevailing threats. So I think we're actually well positioned to use AI to counter a number of these challenges, as Sean mentioned earlier. And in particular, I think the real strength of being able to deal with criminal behavior is the ability to understand behavioral analytics in particular, and AI's really great strength at being able to look at patterns. So I think that's probably, it's really about how you can take the tool and achieve all those things that you've perhaps always wanted to achieve. And I think that can actually strengthen our posture in the long term.
Thanks, Dave. So now we have one for Sean, question for Sean. What are the risks impacting and control points for recruitment integrity with applicants able to generate responses via AI? Quite a specific one, Sean.
Yes, so I'm sure this has happened, but certainly with the tools that are out there now, if you're doing remote interviews, and certainly that's something that we do here at IBAC, it's certainly not impossible for someone, as they're asked a question, to have that question going, as I mentioned before, from talk to text and then fed into an engine, an AI engine, to receive a suitable response and then read that response out live. Probably the best way to get around that is to have face-to-face interviews. But outside of that, I am aware of some of our integrity partner agencies who are actually putting their questions, their recruitment questions, into an AI engine before they actually have the actual recruitment interviews, and getting those responses back and printing them out, so that as a person's responding to them, if the response is either verbatim or very close to the AI response, that can then lead them to have a bit of suspicion that potentially they're not being truthful. But just as has happened in the past, when people may have been exaggerating on their hard copy resumes, it's all about just verification, and if you are suspicious about something, following that up with a face-to-face interview or some other way of doing it where AI won't be actually able to be utilised.
And reference checks.
And reference
always
checks,
important
yes.
to do reference checks. One for Bethany. How can government ensure that privacy and other rights be protected in both government and commercial uses of AI?
Okay, like we know, protecting privacy and other rights is a constant challenge for governments and communities, and there's work being done at all levels, and it's really, I think, about embedding privacy and human rights into your governance frameworks and practices from the outset. So, like, examples of this exist with Australia's AI ethics principles that are available for anyone to use. In the Commonwealth, there's the National AI Assurance Framework as well, and in the VPS, similarly, with our pilot AI assurance framework and administrative guideline and other policies. It's about embedding from the outset the privacy and other protections into all of the work that you do.
Thanks, Bethany. Another one for Dave. What are the key strategies, principles for balancing risk versus utility when it comes to regulators and their use of AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on them in my presentation. I think first and foremost, decisions have got to be kept human. AI provides the inputs, but decision-making always needs to be kept human. Explainability, as I also touched on, are you able to link your content, judgment, and decisions back to authoritative sources? And I guess finally is understanding the data that you have. So in this new world, understanding where your data lies, where your risk lies, and how do you put in place tools to make sure that that's not extricated outside of environments that you don't want it in.
Thanks, Dave. Sean, could you outline for us what information should never be put into an AI program, regardless of a public servant's vetting level?
Well, as per our policy, if you do not want it in the public domain, it should not be going into an AI tool that is online. Certainly that differs if you're able to host an AI tool entirely on your own premise and within the bounds of not being on the internet. But certainly anything classified official, sensitive or above, I would never have it in an AI tool that is online, because those AI tools take your queries, take what you're uploading and ingest it into the model to make that model better. So if you don't want to see that information in the public domain, then certainly don't upload it to an AI tool that's online.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. One for you, Dave. How would you recommend developing and assessing a risk in a risk register with regard to use of AI?
So I think I touched earlier on old concepts in a new context, and I do have a slide that I didn't present today, but what are the shift in skills required there and what are the resultant risks? So, for example, knowledge will now become commoditized, but there will be greater demands on areas of orchestration, architecture, judgment, decision-making. So I think you have to have your risks respond to those domains. Also, I highlighted that the risk has not moved from external actors to internal actors, but certainly the internal risk around data boundaries where data can be surfaced, again, is a shift. So I think there's no new concept in terms of risk assessment and risk response in this regard. It's just what has become amplified in the AI world and what has become diminished in the AI world, and how do you identify those pillars and respond to them in the way you would always respond in terms of risk assessment and risk response.
Thanks, Dave. Bethany, quite a specific one. Is Copilot or any other AI tool approved for use in the VPS?
There's no actual centrally maintained list of approved AI tools across the VPS. It is up to each VPS organisation to assess and determine the AI tools they approve for use and the protective marking that they approve that tool for use for. So not a full answer, but I do know there are a number of departments that are trialling Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Chat as well.
Thank you. Sean, what are the implications of using AI to detect AI? Good question.
As per that example I put on before, there are some tools out there that are very good at detecting certainly images and also written content that has had some sort of AI interaction. But you've got to be aware that AI is not perfect in every circumstance. It can do what's called hallucination. It is fed by its queries and by us humans, and as a result can be flawed. So it is definitely useful, but it needs to be used in conjunction with other tool sets and other human decision making to be able to come to some firm decisions around whether something's fraudulent or fake.
Thank you, Sean. And I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. So thank you for joining us today, and a big thank you again to Dave Barry, Bethany Fennick and Sean Tiller, and to all of you for attending, as well as everyone involved in organising today's event. It's been great to discuss both the advantages and the integrity threats of using AI in the public service, and I hope it's been insightful for all of you too. To stay up to date with the latest publications and information from IBAC, as well as upcoming events, you can subscribe to our e-newsletter, Insights, or visit our website. We also regularly share updates on social media via Twitter or X, LinkedIn and YouTube, so please check those out as well. And finally, as we wrap up and you leave the webinar, you'll see a link to complete a short feedback survey to help us plan future events. Or you can use the QR code on the screen to access the survey. We really do welcome all feedback and appreciate your thoughts. We look forward to seeing you again at future IBAC events. Thank you and goodbye.